Hi, I'm John, Product Specialist for EarthWay. Over the next 25 minutes of this video, I'm going to assemble this product for you. I'm going to take a little extra time to explain some tips and tricks and how to put it together a little faster. If you want to skip ahead in the video, you'll probably have this together in like 15 minutes. But on behalf of the men and women at EarthWay, we thank you for purchasing this 2170. As you pull out your instructions that came with it, the instructions I have here are the March 2021 version. There's actually a May 2021 version. Either of them will work just fine for you. All right, let's look at our hardware kit to start us off today. So I'm referring to my manual, and you'll see the hardware is actually listed in this area here with the quantities of each. But let's walk through to make sure that we have everything that we need. So first of all, on the left-hand side, you'll see 2 bushings and 2 bearings. So I have, these are my bushings. Those will go in the sides of the metal pieces, and then these are the bearings that will actually go on the axle. So we'll put those to the side for now. Starting left to right, you'll have a quantity of 2 of the 1-inch threaded bolts all the way down. And if you're not sure what 1 inch is, you can lay it on the diagram. You'll see right there, 1 inch is perfect length. Then you'll have 4 of these hopper bolts. This is how you put the hopper on the frame. Those are 1.5 inch, and so that looks similar. And then you go over and you have 4 more bolts are 1.5 inch, but what you need to know is this is a hex bolt, and these are pan head screws. So you can see the pan head screw in the top. So that's the difference, so you don't get them confused. And then last but not least, we're going to move over to the next set here is we've got some 5/4 by 2 inches. Again, you can lay it on the diagram and you'll see 2 inches is right there. And then 2 of the longer bolts, which are 2¼ inches, and you'll notice they're just 1/4 inch longer than the other ones. Again, lay it on the diagram if you have any questions. We have a large and a small cotter pin. That's for the drive wheel and the guide wheel, which we'll put that later. Got a handle spacer. We'll handle that one a little bit. Notice then that you have here 15 lock nuts. That's what that is. 2 of the regular threaded nuts. These are not lock nuts. The difference between them is a regular nut doesn't have any insert into it, and a lock nut has a little piece of plastic on the very end that then keeps it from rattling free. And then last but not least, you have your agitator that goes in there. Now in the hardware pack also was a few other pieces, and I want to encourage you that EarthWay has heard our customers say, hey, can you assemble more of the unit? And so in future versions, if you're looking at this video in the future, you may note that these pieces and some of your bolts are already pre-assembled on your spreader and in your handle area. So you may have less hardware than we have here. And that's just because we're moving to assemble more of the product. Step number 1, if you look over here on page 2, is we're going to put the frame on the hopper. So let's start by pulling down your frame components. This is your main frame component. You're going to put it in this orientation here, and you're actually going to put the unit on its side. So I'm going to kind of pull this out for a moment. And the reason being is you're actually going to hold the frame in this location, and then we're going to put the screws through from the inside to the front so that you'll have those together. And that's just as simple as pulling out your screws. So you see first you need the 14 by 1.5 flat screw. So if you're not for sure what a 1.5 inch length screw is, use the diagram on the front, lay it down here, and you'll see, oh, sure enough, that actually is 1.5 inch. So that's perfect. So I'm going to take those 4 and I'm going to feed them through the hopper on this side, and you're going to see it come out. So I'm just going to do that quickly. And then you'll see it pulling out the bottom end like this, and we're going to put the little nut on it. Okay, step 2 is we tightened up all of these with our Phillips screwdriver, so those are all tightened. We are now ready to move to step number 3, which is we need the gearbox, we need the cross brace, and we need the impeller. So we're going to pull those out of our kit. I'm going to start with the gearbox. Gearbox looks like this. Notice this says front, which means that is going to be pointing towards the front of my spreader. The first thing you'll notice about my impeller is my impeller has 2 little dog ears on it, as does my impeller shaft. Has what we call coining on it. So I'm going to take my impeller and I'm going to slide it together over the coining, and lo and behold, I'm all set. My impeller now is on my gearbox. The last step of 3 is to put the cross brace through. And so this is the cross brace. You'll see that in your hardware kit. You're going to put this in through here, and what I suggest is get a really good grip on your gearbox, and then you're just going to wiggle this in, and it does fit. It's tight. So just know it's going to take a little pushing, a little effort. Once you kind of wiggle and turn, it'll go through and it'll slide, and that's all you need then. Okay? Now this is facing front, that's the front of my spreader. So I'm gonna take this upside down and I'm gonna put it just like that. That would then finish for you step number 3. Step number 4 is inserting it into the bottom of the hopper, which we are ready to go. We are now ready for step number 5. Okay, step number 5, let's make sure we have all the hardware together. We have 2 bushings and 2 bearings. Got those? Those are gonna go on the axle, which is this piece here. Then we have these intermediate linkages, 2 of those, you see them in this location there. All right, and then for our bolts, we basically have some 1.5 inch long bolts, okay? 4 of those. And then we have some 2.25 inch long bolts. So this is all that we need for step number 5. And I'm going to show you how to put this together really close. First thing is this frame foot actually comes apart, but we are going to put it in and we're just going to give it a nice little tap to make sure that's where we need it to be. And the reason I say that is one of the first steps I'd recommend is we're going to put a bolt right through here, and it's the 1.5 inch bolt, which is one of those first 4. Now you might say, which end of this do I use? How do I know what goes in? So the point being is, if you look at this, you'll see that it curves in and you've got kind of a short side of it and you got a long side of it. And we're gonna basically take the short side and we're gonna bend it in. So I'm gonna put this right here, just like this, because this is where I need to kind of connect. And I'm just gonna take my bolt and I'm gonna hang it through my little foot, roll it through there. It actually kind of threads in. And when I get done, I'll have both of these hanging on the bottom. Okay, so we are just we've got these 2 bolts through. We're gonna use the other 2 of the very same thing that are threaded. And I'm gonna end up threading them into there. And this is the step after I put the lower frame piece on. So let's go snag our lower frame piece. And you say, well, how does this go on? The way to remember is the crease part that has a little V shape is towards the top. And so this is kind of how it goes. It's flat on the outboard side. This is where the tire goes. So the easiest thing to remember is okay, I need to put it like that. So what I typically do is I take the 2.25 inch bolt, which is really long, and I feed it through this bottom spot right here, like that. And I just kind of hang it on my spreader in that configuration. The next thing I do is I take this piece up and over, and it's gonna go on the inside, and I'm gonna feed my bolt through, grab that piece, and then I'm going to grab my inside of my axle like this. And I'm just going to hand thread it in. Okay, we're going to take the other foot on the other side. Again, this is the V shape. This is where the upper handle goes into. So that's the top. This is the bottom where I'm going to put the axle through. The flat side is outboard. I take my longer 2.25 and I put it through the bottom hole. And I just hang it on the spreader as such. So I don't have to touch anything. Then I go back to my 1.5 inch fully threaded. I bring it up, I feed it through the outside, I feed it through my next little intermediate piece, and then I reach over and grab brace like this. So just hand thread that in, okay? Push all the pieces, and you can kind of get an understanding now of how this all goes together. So now my next step is tighten these up, put my nuts, my 4 lock nuts in these 4 positions, and we'll basically have the bottom spreader ready. And then the last step is then to put the bushings in and the axle. And at this point, everything is just a matter of tightening it up. We're ready to go. So let's do that really fast. Moving to step number 6, what we really need there is the axle assembly and those bushings. So let's talk about step number 6 in the manual, because that's what we're ready to go to. Okay, step number 6. Here in the manual, you're gonna see I've got this foot, and it's got a little bitty notch in it, and I have this axle bearing. And the question is, the axle bearing comes from the outside in. So I'm gonna start with my axle bearing. You're gonna see I got a little notch right here, and I'm gonna rotate that around so my notch goes in there. I just give it just a little push, and now my bushing is held. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna take my bushing again, start from the outside, get to my little notch. You'll notice that I have a little notch here in the bottom of my spreader, so I line that little notch up, just give it a little push, fits in there nice and snug. Okay, so now the next step is to put the axle in. Now these bushings on the axle, they're going to go in like this and sit in there and nicely rotate. It's going to be a roll, but you should know that the bushings are kind of tight on this axle, so you kind of got to really kind of roll them on. Once you get past the little hole that's in there. They fit on pretty nicely, but they're snug. Okay, and you may say, well, which axle? I've got a hole on the outside, I got a hole on the inside. Does it matter? And the real reality is it doesn't matter which way you insert this axle in. One wheel with the outboard hole is the coast wheel, the other wheel is the drive wheel. It just depends on which way you want the drive wheel. I'm going to insert it with the coast wheel, the small end, through here like this. So the easiest answer for me is I'm going to do this. I'm going to put my bushing on. I'm going to feed this axle through like here. All right, we are now ready for step number 7. Look in the manual here. We're going to take our 2 tires. You're going to notice these 2 tires are identical. So there's no left and right to the tires. The difference is the outboard axle here, we're going to put the small cotter pin through, and we're going to let the wheel spin on the axle. So I just put it up here like this, and you'll see I just push the axle through. I'm going to take my cotter pin and I'm going to slide that through my axle of that nature. And it's going to basically then stay in that position, okay? I might turn it just a little bit just to show you how you take your pliers. You pull the bottom of this cotter pin to the left or to the right. Doesn't matter, you just want to make sure it does not fall out, okay? So we can grab the whole cotter pin or just a piece of it. The other thing I like to do is, instead of try to do this way, is I go to the other side. And I want to show that to you for just a moment. You'll see here's the drive axle side. You can see this cotter pin is going to go right in this scenario. But before I do that, I'm going to put the tire on like such. And we'll put this cotter pin right through here. Okay? So it basically is going to line up with the hole that is in the axle. And then you're going to see how this is really helpful with regards to the rest of my assembly. Okay, so I put it in like that. So if you can see right here, I've got my cotter pin through. Now, because there's a hole and it's a drive side, it's super easy to get a hold of it and then just start to bend it. But what I can do is I can use the tire to be part of my leverage. So I just let the tire turn, and then you can see what I end up doing is I grab this cotter pin and turn it like that. And now, guess what? It's in there. It's not coming off. That's my drive side. What's really helpful is when I get over here to the coast side, what I can do again is the same process, is I can use my drive side tire here, and I can just grab a hold of the cotter pin with my pliers, get a nice good bite on it. Okay, we're ready for step number 9. Before we get started, I want to make sure you know that we have all the hardware. So we're going to start out with 3 2-inch bolts. If you're not sure they're 2 inches, again, lay them on here. Sure enough, 2 inches. 3 lock nuts, and a handle spacer. That's what we need. Now, on some of our spreaders, this handle comes configured already and assembled in the box. When it comes assembled, it comes in this position here, where the handle is all the way to the top and the gauge and lever assembly is mounted in that area. And we did that because that makes it compact, okay? That's also the configuration for individuals that are 5'6" or shorter, or maybe you're like me and you make your children actually fertilize your yard for you. So that's perfect for them. Now, for the average operator, you're going to want it to be in this position. So we're going to use these 2 middle holes there. And if you're like 6'3" and you called EarthWay and said, I need a spreader that's for tall people, then again, you're going to put it in the bottom 2 positions down here where you've got all this extra handle width. And that was why we responded to customers with this adjustable handle. Okay, so let's look at what we want to do. So first of all, remember the gauge and lever assembly goes with the handle pieces, okay? And you say, well, how do I know if I've got the handle in right? There is these 2 holes, you can see here, and a little short 1-inch piece. This is the top. If you flip it over, again, 2 holes, long 2.5-inch piece, that's the bottom. So I take the top piece and I put it here, and again, I'm going to put it in the standard person position. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my spacer and I'm going to put it in the top position and just put it through like that and just put a nice little hand tightened piece in there. And what you're going to see is this helps me get the rest of it lined up. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bolt and put it through my gauge lever assembly. I'm going to hold it just like this, and I'm going to put it through this side. I'm going to wiggle it in between the middle of my bracket here. Oop, hold on, this is not working as well. There we go. And again, I'm going to hold that and I'm going to put my little nut on this side. And then last but not least, I'm going to take the last bolt, I'm going to slide it down here, hole of the handle to the center of the handle, and again I'm going to tighten it like that. So this is the standard position. If I again wanted the long position, I would take the gauge lever assembly and move it down one more, taking these two nuts and moving them down to this position, and then I'd have the long position. So now I'm going to tighten all of this up. All right, step number 10, we're going to take the shutoff plate, which is this piece here, and our pivot rod. And this is a little bit difficult, so I'm going to try to explain it for you. You have a kind of a 15-degree bend and then a dog leg, but the dog leg's really short. So this is the end that goes in your shutoff plate. The other end of this rod is not all that bent, but it's got a dog leg, but the dog leg's really long. This is the top that goes towards the handle. So let's take the short end first. You put it in the pivot shutoff plate and then you turn it like that. So that is then how it functions. Let's look at that again. So I take the short end, I push it down and I turn it, and the final resting position is in here on the side. That's all there is for step number 10. All right, we're ready for step number 12. Little tricky step, so let me give you some pointers on how to get it done. We're going to take the handle assembly, we're going to insert it into this piece here. But before we do that, we need to get our pivot bracket aligned and onto our control rod here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my pivot bracket like this. You can see I'm going to put it in this configuration, so I have straight and then a little dog leg right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mount that in this configuration here. This goes up to the handle. This hole here though needs to go through there. So before I get done mounting it, I'm going to take that only hole and I'm going to pivot this pivot bracket up like that. So now I am ready in some configuration to kind of put these bolts in. So I'm just going to hang that one there. I'm going to hang this one there. Now they might fall out while I bring in the handle, but it's easier to get them kind of where they need to be so that when I bring my handle down in here and I line it up on the right side, now all I've got to do is just kind of line it through the handle on both the top and the bottom and give it a little bit of a squeeze, and it makes everything just a little easier to get together. So I'm kind of controlling my handle like that. Now I'm going to tighten up my bolts and we'll be done with this step. Step number 13, I have my control rod. I have a flat end to my control rod and I have a threaded end to my control rod. So I'm just going to thread on one of those nuts. Now these are not the lock nuts. You only had 2 nuts left that weren't lock nuts. Just spinning the control rod, I'm going to get it about 3/4 of the way down through my threads. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Then I'm going to take my control rod handle here and I'm going to push it to 0 to the very front. I'm going to flip over my control rod to the flat part. And what I can do here is I can insert it in the flat part, take it to 0, and that is step number 13 and 14 complete. All right, step number 15. The first thing you want to do is you want to look in the hopper and you want to make sure that it's closed. And that function is just pull back on this bottom piece down here. This is, of course, going to be open, and then this is going to be closed. So I pull all the way back so that I am shut off inside my hopper. I'm going to take my control lever to 0 all the way forward, and you're going to see now this is the point of calibration. So what I want to do is I want to move the bottom lock nut up on my control rod till it's just really snug against the bottom of that. So I'm, in essence, as I do this, I'm kind of pulling all of the slack out of this control rod, and you can see now it's pretty tight. And then I take the top one and I bring it down to it, and I go the opposite way on the top one, and now that is just solid. There's no play in here. My unit is fully calibrated and ready to go to the field. We are now ready for step number 16, which is really pretty simple. I'm going to put the agitator in my unit, and that's just as simple as pushing this in and snapping it in. My agitator's in. While I'm here, I just want to talk about side spread control for a minute. You'll see that I have all 3 holes open, which means I'm going to have a full 180-degree spread pattern, very even. You'll notice EarthWay spreaders are not like the competitors. They can't manage where the material goes, and they end up throwing it to the back, and they put a mud flap here in the back so that they don't end up covering your shoes. The EarthWay drop holes are set geometry perfectly to give you that 180 spread, not wasting your fertilizer. Now the other thing is side spread control. So you'll notice underneath the unit you have a lever that you can turn on, and when you flip the lever on, you'll end up closing 2 of the drop holes. And so if your unit came from the factory and it happened to already be in this configuration, you might be like, well, how come I've only got 2 holes open down here? You see these 2 holes are closed now. That just means that this hole here will be spreading 90 degrees this direction and you will not have any material wasted. Some folks have said, well, oh my goodness, something wrong with my spreader. I've only got 2 holes open. It's really just side spread controls on. You flip that lever to the right and you'll be open. Okay, last but not least, you have 2 remaining screws and 2 remaining nuts. The simplest thing to do with those is you insert them from the outside here into your hopper. You put a little set screw on it like this. Do the same thing on the other side. This doesn't need to be tight at all. All you're doing here is you're creating kind of a little lock spot so that when you take the screen, which has a nice little thumb hole here, you can slide that underneath there, then your screen isn't going to come up. If you go over some holes, it's going to stay in the bottom of your spreader. And that is the last step. You are now ready to go to the field with your spreader. Hey, well that's all there is. Now we've followed the instructions through, and then hopefully in 25 minutes or less you've been able to put together your commercial spreader, which is going to last you a number of years, if not a lifetime. On behalf of the men and women here in Bristol, Indiana that put together these components, and as you can see the engineers have designed these some 30-some-5 patents behind me, we thank you for making a purchase of EarthWay. Go to our website if you need to watch further videos, download the latest instructions, look at your spread settings, or if you'd like to, just send us an email here at support@earthway.com and we'll be happy to help you out. Again, have a great day. Happy spreading.